I'm Elise Svensk, and this week I'm joined by C, a paediatric OT who's found her niche working with autistic and PDA young people, and is sitting with a question a lot of us are carrying at the moment. When the systems keep failing your clients, how do you keep on showing up? Now let's get started. Welcome, C. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
Tell us a little bit about you.
So I am an OT, and I have been an OT for about 5 years now, and I'm working in the paediatric space, but probably with more teens and adolescents as well. I didn't plan on becoming a paediatric occupational therapist, but that's where I have ended up. And yeah, I love it. I love the work. I love the clinical work, but I've always found, I guess, managing the other parts of this job challenging. And I always have felt curious about the long-term sustainability of this job and this role.
Such an interesting thing, isn't it? Before we get into that, tell us a bit about how you've become the OT that you are today. So you graduated about 5 years ago. What's your learning history look like? What's it look like as you've been growing into this lovely OT you are now?
So I've worked across a few private practices in a larger city and now have fallen into our role subcontracting. So still within a private practice organisation, but just with a little bit more autonomy and flexibility, which has worked really well for me. I've also really enjoyed being able to work with the clients that are quite specific to my areas of interest and I think my areas of strength, and also choose my own supervisor who also is able to support me with those niche areas of interest. I think I found early on in my career working in private practice, there was a focus on kind of being a jack of all trades and not, seeing lots of different presentations of kids and young people. But I found that fairly overwhelming, and I think I found my areas of interest and strength quite quickly. And yeah, I think when I gave myself permission to lean into that, it really helped me feel more confident and feel less overwhelmed by the role of an OT that can be so variable, and there's so many different kind of parts of supporting people.
I wonder, I talk with a lot of therapists who I've just come out of a mentoring session actually, and their caseload is across the age span. So, Paeds is so diverse in itself, isn't it? And so many things. And I wonder, depending on the type of learner that you are, and it sounds like you're someone who really likes to master and know what you're doing and why you're doing it, that of course it would have felt really intense and yucky having a whole caseload of, I wonder if I do this or I wonder if I do that, where now that you've niched, you can sort of be the master of what you clinically know. You can pick the PDs that you do and what your approach looks like. So we can probably say, you're specializing in the PDA space, which is a really interesting area in the Paeds world. How did you decide that? How did that fall to you? Because a lot of people find that area really hard. So how is that your love area?
I think when I first started working in the pediatric space, I happened to have a few young people who were quite complex, and I think it was really interesting as a new grad OT. I had never heard of PDA or anything like that before, and I was doing the classic thing when you're still learning, which was just creating a very rigid plan of what a session's going to look like. And I'd go into the session, and then I had a number of young people that just could not follow the plan, and it really challenged me. And I think I was really curious about why I had these few kids that just couldn't do the plan, and I was making it interest-based, and I was trying really hard to make it fun, and then they wouldn't engage. And then I would go back out and think about it and think, how can I make it even funner and even more kind of interest-based? And it just wouldn't work. And they were just on their own agenda and their own plan. And I think I noticed that, those really traditional kind of the way that I had observed therapists work and the way that I'd kind of learnt therapy should look like just wasn't working. And maybe it's I felt like I wanted to kind of crack that and work out why therapy wasn't working. And I also had kind of learnt that the therapy journey for a lot of these kids had been really disrupted, and they had had a lot of therapists that had come in and out, and they hadn't really been able to find the support that they needed. And I think now in hindsight, I relate to some of the experiences of these kids as well. And I remember myself being highly autonomous. I still am, and sometimes feeling challenged by really rigid systems. So I think I also had that kind of ability to relate to them in some way. And it's been awesome. It's been such a wonderful part of my journey, building really beautiful relationships with young people who have really struggled to build relationships, especially with adults in positions like therapist, teacher, I guess, where there is sometimes that hierarchy. I still support one of the young people that I support supported as a new grad who is autistic PDA, and they recently said to me that they remember when they first met me and I just didn't understand what they needed. And I was obviously still learning because I was really struggling with creating a session that they could participate in, but now I've gotten much better. And I thought that was really funny that they were also able to like reflect on their journey and like how far we've come. And that's really been through building that relational safety and like, I guess, curiosity, trying to understand and collaboratively work out how we do this together and how we make this therapy work.
How beautiful. That's so cool. You don't often, I was thinking this the other day, you don't often get good service evaluation feedback. Like, my goodness, you're doing so well.
Yeah. And I can trust it as well, because if I don't do a good job or if I make a mistake, they also will point that out.
So tell me, how does the contracting piece work then? So I imagine one of the transition points coming into the contracting role, you get to say yes or no to different referrals as well. What does that look like for you now? So I was just thinking, like, if you're in a little practice, you probably wouldn't be able to get all of these preferred referrals. So is the service that you're working with a bit bigger, so they've got like a lot being referred across? What does that look like?
No, it is a small practice, but I have found that, as you mentioned, there's a lot of that probably find this space challenging. So I found
tricky would be a very accurate word.
Yeah, I found that as I have kind of really leaned into this and I guess worked with a lot of like schools and families and even just that kind of more broad PDA community, which is really strong, I have attracted clients that are in that kind of area, which is beautiful. And so now I would say that my caseload is probably majority autistic PDA and teens.
And do you think, I know just before we started recording, you were saying you've had like a bit of a everything's happening, I'm feeling a bit overwhelmed and do you think that that's part of the caseload, or do you think it's the bigger picture stuff? I was just seeing a post before about a young autistic girl saying, I feel like a burden because all the messaging out there at the moment is that we are a burden. Where do you think, like, what are you thinking, like, with this feeling of overwhelm? Because I could imagine a lot of people with your caseload would be overwhelmed by the caseload, but I don't know that that's where your overwhelm or just the feeling a lot is coming from. But is it the bigger picture stuff to do with the caseload?
Yeah. So I think a lot of the clients I support are just failed by so many systems. And I think that is really hard. And it's even like trying to build a care team around some of these young people that actually need a really like solid multidisciplinary kind of team around them, but finding those the supports that work, and then working within the school system and that often failing to support them, and then within the NDIS, which often fails to support them, and then just feeling really powerless. And I think it's seeing, families in really, really challenging situations, and you get to the point where there's not a whole lot else I can do without these systems changing. And then I think about, how do I go upstream and how do I try and change these systems? I actually met with my local member for parliament yesterday around kind of the NDIS and my concerns about the bill and about these, especially these young people who are likely to fall through the cracks because their presentation 100%. And they can be really high masking. And I think that's what's really frustrating, is the systems around.
Absolutely. Have you had a look at any of Michelle Bahari's stuff? She wrote that book maybe 2 years ago about moral burnout. That would be really good to go and have a look at.
I haven't, but I know I'm across the term. I that would be a really good thing to explore more, because I definitely feel that. And I think I have a really strong sense of justice. And I think that's a big part of why I feel quite burnt out, is because I find it really hard to manage stress that is so big and so out of control. And just it feels like a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you could hear that from when you were sort of starting saying, all the other stuff that comes with this work that we do. And that's the other stuff. And I do think, like, when you're aware of those other things, or those things play heavily on your heart, it just takes so much out of you, and it's so difficult to explain to people why you're feeling, especially when you love the work. So it's not like I hate work, it's not like I don't want to see my clients, it's none of that. It's this big picture just feeling of, it's grief, it's all of the things. But I do want you to have a bit of I think we could reshape this a little bit, because we want to have a think about, with these kiddies moving forward, what would it look like if we took the NDIS piece out? Because I'm worried that we've worked really hard to set them up with their teams, but those teams are not stable, safe, consistent with these changes, right? So what if we preemptively started to talk to them about their private pathways, and what does that look like if they had to intentionally build a private system around them, leaning in, that's all sucks and it's really annoying that that's all happening. But I wonder what that might look like if we did lean further into that direction. What are your thoughts around that?
I think it's really good to have those conversations early. I just think,
Mm-hmm.
I just find it so challenging that is
Yep, where we're
a
at.
certain privilege. And it's just you're going to then, there are families, vulnerable, and probably are the ones that really need that wraparound support, that actually just won't be able to access that. And
Yep.
then it's thinking about, how do I make it accessible but powerless? And then you feel like, yeah, I've worked a lot across kind of different demographics of people, and I actually have really enjoyed working in areas or demographics that are more vulnerable. And I feel really sad, I guess, service delivery that I won't be able to
Yep.
maintain under kind of the changes that might happen. But I think in terms of this is where I find it really hard to have like the business hat
Yep.
on, clinician or therapist or just human hat on, and to balance those things, and found that really challenging in private practice, especially working in private practice that I know like that we need to make money to survive, but sometimes I have been stuck in like, this person needs help and needs support. That's more important to me than money, but that's why I'm subcontracting and not sole trading.
Yeah. And I think this is one of the challenges we see with a lot of therapists who have never worked in a system. So I'm the same as you, went straight to private practice. So in my world, well, I did placements in the hospital and was like, oh, this is not for me. Like, I want to have the autonomy to be able to provide you the support that you need in the way that you need it. But I do wonder whether, for those of us who had those early career experiences in a more structured, stringent service, to go, oh, this has been pretty sweet what we've been able to give people. And that's, that's really sounds flippant when I say that. But if I think, when I trained, they got $12,000 over 2 years and everything else they paid out of pocket for. So it's been amazing over the past 10 years to see what that looks like and what all those supports look like. But it has shifted what that therapeutic support, what the expectation looks like, what of all our other systems look like around our little people as well. And I am well aware how crappy this is, thinking about in the school settings and all of that. Like, it's so tricky to get these supports. But it is really curious when we start unpacking that and go, okay, but we've been able to provide this really amazing support. I wonder whether it would be helpful for you to have a think about intentionality. So I find this work is really tricky, and I've been reflecting a lot on it when we're taking a relationships-based approach or a relationships model, which is what you're sitting under. Where does that go if we can't do it with the intensity and the frequency and all of those things? But it can still be there, right? Like, when we're intentional about, how often do I need this to happen and what does that look like? And if we had to put it on a priority pyramid, like, who is the most important relationship to connect with? And I wonder whether that might be an easier way for you to start considering these, like, outside of your realm, but to go, okay, for this person, I am their safest person, but this person, the psych is actually their safest person, or for this person, that's who they're really needing, but I can still sit in the background for this. What does that feel like when I say that for you?
Yeah, I think that's great. And I think that is kind of what has happened naturally, in a sense. So even if the frequency of, you might have a higher frequency with one therapist, but you might consult with other, I guess, disciplines. So I have found that to be really, really helpful as well. I also have found that with a lot of my clients, like, my relationship with their parent is really important, and that's like probably the priority sometimes, depending on their age and their like ability to participate in therapy sessions. But having that kind of contact with a parent and providing that support is really important. I've also done some like trainings with schools, and again, that's trying to upskill other people to support these children that are actually on the ground with them for longer periods of time. And I think that's all the upstream things. I think in my brain, that's probably how I would try and pivot if things change.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So if a family can, privately pay for me to go in and upskill a school team, then that is a really good way to use that kind of private funding.
But I wonder, like, that would be quite tricky, right? So think about, if they were private paying, if they were a brand new client, it'd be a little while before that. And actually, I've been talking about a different model thinking for this, which would be helpful for you, where it's like a school observation, which is what we would typically say in the pediatric space, versus school consultation. And that school consultation is like a chat with the teacher before you go, observation, go and actually do that. And then another intentional, like, we'll have another handover touch point. So that might be just good to start thinking about in your head so that you're putting those expectations in, because this stuff, I ran a workshop the other day about how to add private clients to your practice, because I think, again, you're in that space of probably most of your clients have been private, so it feels, probably most of your clients have been NDIS, so it feels so yucky to go, oh, what would this look like if you had to pay for my services? But you are an incredibly experienced clinician in a very niche area who obviously has a great rep and is doing some really amazing things. So I think sometimes we come in with a scarcity mindset of, no, they wouldn't pay for this. No, they wouldn't. They would if I am really good, and you are really good. So, if you genuinely go, what I think is the most beneficial thing that I can offer you is a school consultation. It will cost this amount of money. I will do X, Y, and Z in that time. They're more likely to say yes, right? But when we come at it over, oh, I wonder, we could maybe do this thing, then they're like, no. I was thinking this in my house the other day. I organized a team meeting. I'm like, that's going to cost me $1,000. There's not enough problems just yet that is really worthwhile. But when we're more intentional with what we're doing and why we're doing it, and we can really show the benefit of it, which you absolutely can, then it's a bit of an easier sell, is a yucky word, but sell is how we're putting it out there.
100%. And I think it's with the NDIS, it's been so opposite to that. There's been this ability to, I guess, to have more time. And then sometimes you don't know when that time ends. It just goes on and on and on. So we probably have, I know that sometimes being intentional is not the thing that I'm thinking about, front of mind all the time, especially when there's a lot going on and you're kind of putting out spot fires, and that's the way that things are going. So there's a part of me that would feel, I think, even for my energy management, working like that would help me, because I think the other thing is when everything feels so big and out of control, and there's so many things going on all at once, and sometimes you're the only allied person on the team. The amount of times that people have said, but you're our main therapist. And I'm like, no, I'm not. I'm no, we are meant to be a team. I'm not the main therapist. But that's you end up in that role. And then even then, just being really protective of my scope of practice is hard when you do have that relational safety and you're the only one that can be in a room with the child, can be challenging. But I think when in my brain, I think about I have this idea that if I could work in more of a controlled way, or if I knew, if my role was really clearly defined and that was an expectation that was clear to everyone, I think I would find that really helpful. You are able to stay in that lane and feel good about it and be able to deliver something kind of in a whole.
There's probably not really anything stopping you from doing that at the moment. What's stopping you, obviously, is their prior knowledge of you and their current relationships that are set up the way that they are. But all of this is moving forward. And I agree, this is so tricky. And I remember I felt exactly like this when I left my first role. I went off on maternity leave, and I remember just being like, oh, these families rely on me so heavily, and what will they ever do without me? And I had put myself into this space of I was their safe person. And then I went on maternity leave, and they found a different safe person. And I was like, I was making myself sick, going off on leave, worrying about what was going to happen to them. And, this is really tricky, but it was also incredibly helpful for me to go, oh, that's actually not helpful, me setting you up that you're so reliant on me, because that means I can't stop and I can't break. And you're also going to have chances where you have to actually transition to other people, or funding will change. There's so many things that could happen through your life. And I wonder, especially with you being so autonomous in your role, there's no one sort of checking in over the top of you to be like, maybe 10 touch points per week, not okay. There's not really anyone helping to help you find your comfy boundaries in that space. So you've sort of accidentally become incredibly available, which with the caseload, it makes sense. I get it, all of those things. But from a protective space for yourself, also makes it incredibly tricky when you are just that responsive person all of the time.
100%. It's interesting because I found this is the support that a lot of these families seek, is responsive support, because there are so many decisions that are being made that are feeling maybe really unconventional. I think there's a lot of I provide, I guess, sometimes just being a sounding board to someone is helpful, but it is really hard to be that sounding board in the moment that they need it, and also manage your own time and all of that. So I totally can see that. It was really positive for me when I have shifted jobs. That's been a similar experience. I took 4 months off probably 18 months ago. And that was, yeah, it was exactly the same thing. The idea of like, oh my gosh, what's going to happen? Everyone's going to be so disappointed. And then I had a few people that when I returned to work found me and they've come back onto my caseload, but majority of those families found support and it was
Yep.
okay. So yeah, I think that's been helpful as well. And also, I am really aware of when I get to the end, like the end, we've still got a brilliant relationship, but there is not much else I can do in terms of actual support. And I think that's when you're like my job is still a therapist and an OT, not just like, a friend.
Family support. Yeah. Yeah.
So I think that's also, yeah, being aware of when you actually do run your course and when you have worked really hard with families and the parents are really upskilled around supporting their own child and you're not really doing a whole lot anymore apart from just being there. I think I'm still learning to work out when that point is, but I definitely have gotten better at like having those conversations and stepping back.
Great. Have you heard me talk about, and you might not have heard me say this before, about the quarterly planning or like 3-month planning idea, that block of planning?
Yeah. And so historically, my first job, it was really good. It was set up that I would do termly therapy blocks and goal planners in kind of outreach, which I found really good. And I just have found it so hard. I've really
Totally.
tried to implement it again in like my own kind of subcontracting role. It's really hard with these sorts of clients to set.
I think yes, definitely, but I'm not maybe thinking so much those explicit goals with those kiddies because that's not really appropriate. More maybe what your intention for the 3 months is. So just like you were saying before, like putting up not so much the spot fires, but think about like those questions, them asking those things to you, because there should be quite minimal that is you need to make this decision right now for me. Like I need to decide which school I'm going to, like that's a couple of weeks decision at a minimum. So I'm wondering, even if you did that quarterly just in your head and went, where is this family at? Like, are we stable? Am I in teaching? Are we in like school's really tricky at the moment? So my big picture focus for this family is 3 months of like supporting to navigate that. Because I think that a lot of what can happen with the work that we do is a lot of our support ends up being back end. We sometimes bill for it, we sometimes don't see that as clinical support, even though it absolutely is clinical support. So, like you said, you had those clients where you're like, actually, this is better if I do this with the family and I don't really need the little person in front of me. But I wonder if instead we did that intentionally across that quarter. So, really checking in at the start of a term to be like, great, where's things at? And an intentional pivot when appropriate rather than a reactional pivot.
Yeah, I really like that. I think I have done that with a few of my families kind of accidentally, where it's like a monthly like check-in with, or it's even a monthly care team meeting. And that's been really good to reduce the amount of back and forth throughout the week, where, because I guess then a parent knows that they have this time that's coming
Absolutely.
up and talk through these things that maybe wanting support with or wanting to collaboratively problem solve.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you do parent coaching as like a regular part of your intervention or more of a responsive piece? Like what does that look like with your caseload?
I would say it's fairly responsive, but I would say that I do it quite frequently. So yeah, and I think it's ebbed and flowed a little bit. So I've gone through periods where I have done predominantly, parent coaching, and then maybe we've gone back into some like capacity building stuff. But yeah, I think as a whole, with these clients that I support, a part of it is also like how I'm doing it, which I'm not sure if this is the best way, but this is the way that I feel has worked, is kind of spreading out my support with parent, with child, with school, if there is a school.
Yeah, like I imagine you're very intentional with your actual clinical, when you've got that kid in front of you, I imagine that you're incredibly intentional about what you're doing and why you're doing it. So I don't think there's anything in there, but I'm just thinking across a whole caseload, that's where the random extra stuff is coming because you've got so many people at so many different points.
Yeah.
What do you find, because you're doing 3 days clinical, 3.5 days what's creeping, like what's following you across into the other times?
So yes, I would say like parent consults or parent coaching.
Yep.
Which I quite like. So I think my ideal week is like 4 days a week. And I quite like having that kind of fourth day flexible.
As a flexi. Yep.
Yeah. And I think when I was meeting KPIs in like private practice, that's what I found really hard because I had to have booked KPIs, but I was always well and truly over the KPIs
because you're doing so much of this stuff.
Yeah. So I think I've learned that with this demographic, with this caseload, that having that time carved out that you can offer and have available is always someone who will fill it. And it's
Yep.
really helpful in to control the amount of time you're then
Totally. But I can see why. And like it's tricky because the work, like you said, this work that you're doing will always require you to do it. And it does sound like you're being intentional with all of it. I think potentially you could do that little termly planning, but if you keep your Thursday free, so you've always got that flexi time to catch up and bits and pieces. I think the trickier part is, like you said, that being possibly a little bit too responsive. So maybe that's a piece to have a little bit of a think about, where maybe we respond and say, thanks, let's chat about this next week, rather than getting into this big back and forth. Because I imagine that's probably where you're actually losing time, because from the sounds of it, the things that you're pushing to a Thursday is working really, really well. But I imagine there's a lot of those random back and forths happening.
100%. And I think I found it really hard as well to feel if I want to do a really good job, then I often will get like positive feedback from families about like, wow, like you're so responsive. And then that reinforces like why I'm valued is because I'm so responsive. And then I feel like it's this cycle of
it's like this dopamine hit as well. Like, I can help you. Let me quickly. I totally get it. I am 100% there as well. But we used to call this in our practice doing the extra. So we would always go above and beyond for everybody. And it really did burn our team out because we weren't containing that extra. We weren't being we were being intentional, but we weren't maybe doing as much contracting with it. So we would do this above and beyond. We'd respond to all the emails, we'd do all those things, but then we'd be like, oh my God, why are we so tired? Oh, because we did all of that. And then instead becoming a bit more intentional with it to be like, thanks for that email, let's chat next week, rather than getting into this back and forth. So you've got another tab open to that kid, another tab to this kid over here. So yeah, I think that might be something for you just to think about. I actually had a colleague, we had a chat the other day, and we came up with an idea of like, does this need to be responded to right now? Like, does this take 20 seconds to respond to? And if it takes longer than that, that needs to be weighted and sat on and possibly just pushed to the next session.
Yeah. I think the other thing I find really hard is written communication. And I think that's also where I get like responding to an email for me is really quite high cognitive load. I'm very much a verbal processor, and I can talk something through much far better than I can like type it out. And I think sometimes when I write an email, I'm really aware of like how it might be perceived. Maybe this is from working with a lot of PDAs, but I'm always like, okay, was that like, yeah, I'm very conscious of how my language is being perceived or read by someone else. And then I get really stuck on being able to send it in case it doesn't sound like, maybe it sounds too direct, and I think that's also part of it. So then I end up like having all these emails pinned that I need to get back to, but I can't quite do it because it's so hard to like express what I'm trying to express in written comms. So I think that's also helped. It is actually probably more helpful for me and possibly the person I'm communicating with, especially if there is a communication difference. If I'm communicating with a neurodivergent parent, that we actually do have that face-to-face, because then there is so much more room to ensure
to repair and hold and do all of the things. Absolutely. I think that is something good for you to start thinking about. And you could probably say that out loud. So you could probably start saying that to these families and say, you can send me your big brain dump emails, but it's actually really tricky for me because I'm so conscious about him. And you could literally just lean into, I work with this population, so I'm really conscious about written things. So I'm actually going to push this to next time we chat. And so your responses back are like, thank you. See you next week. That's it. You're not writing these massive verbose emails back, because especially when they are, and I imagine they are big, because you're getting big questions being sent to you. And this is where I think, and especially if we start thinking about them being a private client, this is the stuff where we're doing a stack of clinical work. Like, this is all clinical reasoning. This is all like clinical recommendations, but it's not being seen as that because we're doing it off the cuff. So the family doesn't go, oh, wow, she's such a great, look at her good clinical reasoning. They're just like, oh, she loves answering these questions. No worries that it took her 2 hours to respond to my email. And then we're not, because I bet you're not billing for it. So
the beautiful thing about my families is they always have to remind me. They're like, please bill for that. Like, that's been, because I suck. I find it really hard to bill if I haven't received consent to bill. Like, I feel, so if there is something like that's come up that maybe I haven't like seeked, they have that
straight up.
Informed consent to bill. My families are often like, did you bill for that email? Like, did you bill for your time? Which is beautiful. I think that I feel like my time is really valued by the people I work with. And that's been really lovely as well to like feel, because I can get into that, especially like because I sometimes take a long time to process and like then respond. And then I'm like, well, I don't know how much time that should take. So then I think, oh, well, I won't bill at all because maybe that would take someone else like 30 seconds to reply, but it's taken me like 30 minutes. Which,
It's tricky though. I think a lot of people think that,
Yeah.
but you're probably clinically at a point now where it actually just takes you as long as it takes you.
Yeah.
And the thought and the nuance behind it is, again, a clinical nuance that you're using to make sure the message gets across. So it's not that you're clinically going, I don't know how to write this. Oh, should I go and search? Like, that's not what's going on. You are consciously really thinking about how I word this so it's received it just like we would in a session. So it's no different to your clinical time. But we, similar in that extra piece, started to transition to, I can do that for you, but it will take that amount of time and I'll have to build that. So that might be a nice piece for you just to get that approval at the starting point, especially with a nice caseload who's happy with you doing that anyway. There's also something we're going to have to get a lot stronger with as we start having more private clients coming through, that you say, okay, and you can, again, out loud say this. It's going to probably take me a little bit longer because I want to be really mindful about how I word it to school because it is such a sticky situation at the moment. Let's plan that it'll take me about an hour. If it's less, I'll charge you less, but maximum it would be that. So I think that might be helpful. And then it gives you a bit of a time frame that can be helpful for some, not helpful for others. But I do think that putting some words around it is helpful compared to just doing everything for everybody and then going, oh my gosh, I'm so exhausted.
I think it's helpful for families as well because sometimes it's like the non-response that's what's stressful. But if they know that you've seen it and they know that like it's on your radar and you will get back to it, like sometimes that's enough to feel like what they have said has been seen and heard and we will circle back to it.
Yeah, absolutely. And that might just be as minimal as over the next couple of weeks, just saying to everyone, I had a chat in supervision and I'm being really mindful. I'm working on my email communication moving forward. When you flick me an email and I receive it, would you like me just to send back thanks for that? Or because I need to be mindful that I'm not just brain dumping, I don't have the time, out loud. Again, there's nothing wrong with putting those strategies out loud. I'm currently getting a lot from therapists back where they just do the smiley face or the thumbs up that they've received. I'm like, this is so helpful for me. That's great. I really like that, but not everybody would enjoy that. So having a bit of a chat around that, I think might be nice.
Yeah, no, 100%. It's really interesting when you're communicating with lots of different types of communicators. And I think it's really powerful to actually just to name and ask and be curious. And I think even for a lot of my families, like that's really appreciated because sometimes they will have a strong communication preference that's really easy to like put in place, but it's just knowing and asking those questions.
Absolutely. And I think it then takes a bit of that cognitive load off you. It sounds like you would be quite good just holding your clients in your head and everything that's going on. Do you ever get overwhelmed by the amount of information you're holding, or is it sitting pretty nicely now?
I think it is okay now. I have found every time I've transitioned to a new caseload, it's actually taking me a really long time. And I have found in those periods, the emotional energy and like cognitive load of just, I guess, getting it all in my brain is really, really hard. But I think when you do have those relationships and you have had that time to really get to know kind of someone's situation, I actually don't have a huge caseload as well, which I think helps. And I think, again, having a caseload that is quite specific to my area of interest means that like there are, I'll have something in my brain for one family and then it's also really relevant and for family. And that I find that really helpful.
Yeah, it's great. It's starting to systemize all of your things and it's starting to make sense. How many kiddies have you got on your caseload at the moment?
I reckon I would say maybe like 22.
Yeah, cool.
Mainly fortnightly sessions.
Yeah, so it's still a decent caseload. Like it's not a tiny caseload, but it's a nice thing to reflect on how tricky it is when you started to now when you can just hold that and know where everybody's sitting. The client snapshot tool that I've got is something that I often will suggest people use because it's so hard to hold all of that. But once you've learned how to systemize it, like I remember my clients, I know what's going on. Like you ask me a question, I can tell you where that's at. But for a lot of therapists, they find that incredibly overwhelming and really tricky. So it's nice that that's just all sitting in there, easy, ready for retrieval.
Definitely when I was seeing like, a broader caseload, it was like that. Like, and then it was, I felt so guilty because I was able to hold like some clients and that's that interest, like that area of interest for me that I'm like really interested in learning more and deep diving into. So those clients are front of mind. And then I had my little handwriting kiddos at the back of my brain that never got any kind of brain
Sorry,
space.
no power to you. I'll figure you out when you come in.
And then I would go into the session and be like, oh, I don't like, this is not, I'm finding this so hard because I haven't been able to have the time to like do this really well. I think that's been a really positive transition out of that work that I just found, because then I felt like I wasn't the best therapist for those kids anyway. Couldn't like, it just wasn't my area. It wasn't the area that I was to lean into.
So cool though that you found your area. It's so exciting. So what does your PD plan look like moving forward? So you're getting supervision. How often do you do supervision? What does that look like for you?
So I'm doing supervision monthly at the moment. I did supervision fortnightly last year because it was my first year subcontracting, and now I've moved to monthly. But I also am doing a bit of peer like support as well. So I've got a really nice group of OTs that are kind of at a similar career stage and client kind of base as me. So that's really lovely as well. Professional development, I think probably one of my goals, which has been a goal for a little while, but I would like to prioritize it more this year, is kind of trying to lean into more OT specific PDs. I think I've done a lot of like PDA PDs, neurodiversity affirming PDs, kind of all of that sort of stuff. But I have really tried to come back to that like OT lens. And I think that's something that I have found a little bit challenging in the NDIS, I guess, is that I don't think our scope's been very well protected in a lot of ways. So that's probably my goal is around how I put all of that knowledge back into like that really key kind of occupational therapy lens.
Have you picked a PD? Like, what are you imagining? Or are you just like, there's something out there that's going to pull this all together for me? Like, is there something on your mind?
No, I haven't picked at the PD, but I think like this isn't PD, but this has been something that I've really like kind of dove back into is like the PEO model. And now I use that as like a huge tool across my practice, which I wasn't really using at all. Yep. So I think like maybe it's even just
more consolidation back into a model. I wonder, having a look at Rhiannon and Chris Burn-in and Burnout model might be nice. That might be a nice one to have a look at.
Yeah, I have seen that. I find it so hard to like, again, to like choose professional development, but I would like to. And then I've also thought about like for me becoming a mental health OT would be another area of interest.
That would be a really good idea. That was the other one I was actually thinking. So the OTA mental health early training, I think there's a couple of modules, but that would be a decent one. I think that would probably even be better than like Rhiannon's one is a model, so you can just sort of learn that. But this one that encompasses and helps you with risk assessment and all of the other bits and pieces. But for you long term, looking at trying to get your mental health endorsement so that you can work with a lot of these clients with the amazing skills that you've built up.
It's just such a hard process. That's the daunting.
Yes, it is.
That's what I feel is like a little bit inaccessible right now, but that would be something I'd be really interested in doing. And then doing like training in like internal family systems is something I'm really interested in, or like more somatic kind of therapy stuff. So that's where I would probably lean.
Yeah. I think that mental health, the OTA one, might do a bit of boundary work. So just coming back and thinking about the work that we do and the responsiveness that we have, I wonder whether leaning into a bit more of that mental health support with other private mental health OTs who are mental health OTs, not just general, OTs doing mental health, that would be really cool to learn how they navigate. Because imagine, like they would have crisis all the time they have to navigate, and how do they boundary that? So I've said on the pod before, but Robbie Ducky might be a cool one to reach out to. Muriel, I know, does a bit of work in that space as well. But I think that might be a nice intentional plan to, whether it is the PD or whether it is a supervision with somebody who sits more in that mental health space.
My super partner is mental health endorsed as well. So yeah, that's been really good. I have spoken to her a number of times about it, but yeah, it just feels like such a big thing to go through the endorsement. That's the barrier for me right now. But I think maybe starting with that, like learning, that specific OT learning, and feeling then more even like, I guess, confident in justifying my skills as mental health specific, because I think that's also what I find hard, because I haven't worked in an explicitly mental health role, doing a lot of mental health. I think my lens is quite mental health informed and trauma informed, but maybe having language, being able to justify that more would help with the
absolutely. And maybe I just wonder, maybe even this question can just come back to your supervisor around that boundary piece and navigating that. So sometimes we don't get to those cool questions because we're just chatting through caseload or reflecting, those other bits and pieces. But you said to me before we started that, you learn best through hearing about other people's experience. So literally saying, how did you learn how to manage your boundaries? Like if you are a private mental health OT, how did you learn this? Because I see lots of people who are working for themselves who maybe don't, and maybe that hasn't been an area that they've really developed, which brings us right back to what we said at the start, where a lot of people learnt these boundaries in different systems before they went into the private sector. So they learnt that, yes, this is a crisis, but it's not my crisis.
Yeah.
It is a crisis and I can help you, but I'm not the person who fixes this for you.
Yeah, it's like I have found the NDIS just so enabling of like someone who maybe is quite naturally empathetic.
The kind helper who will help whoever with anything.
Yeah, because it's in my nature outside of work, but this industry has just like really enabled it and spiraled it out of control sometimes. So I have thought about like if I was to go into a system that was more confined, like a hospital system or a system, if that would help. But then I would just the idea of being in that confined in that system feels hard in a different way. But yeah, I think there has to be a shift around boundaries and feeling okay with that and feeling like still authentic and values kind of aligned for me, but it is the only way that I will be able to continue like doing this job in this way.
Absolutely. Do you know, it might even be worthwhile actually with a psychologist. So finding, there's a couple of the psychology groups that I'm in, and the boundaries that they have are so strong. Like, oh my God, so much stronger than our boundaries. And you look at it and go, like, in my early career, I'd be like, oh, like they're not very responsive. And now I go, oh, that's why. Like they do that intentionally. But that's something they were taught to do while they were training. And we were not taught how to do this, which I find incredibly frustrating. But I have had very good feedback about that OTA mental health training. And I believe that it would encompass a lot of that. But I also think because it's a big picture training, it's going to help you to bring all of this together and consolidate all of your learning and reasoning and all of those things, which then helps you to decide if you want to do the endorsement stuff further down the track, but just puts you better into that space of like, who am I in this space? Yes, this is what I do already, but now I have language and words and modeling around it.
100%. Yeah, no, I think that's a really, really good idea. And I will look into that. I think that would help me create a bit more structure.
Fantastic. Okay, well, that does bring us to the end of our chat today. So we normally finish with a bit of a note to self. So let's go, I don't know, do you want to go to baby OTU or to when you started as a contractor? What would be a nice time to do a little bit of a reflection to yourself?
Maybe baby OT, starting out.
Okay, well, tell us, what would you say to baby C?
I think I would say like continue to be curious and question things and question the way that things are done and continue to ask the hard questions.
It's lovely. I love that. Always being curious. One of my favorite things. Well, thank you so much for joining us, C.
Thanks, Alice. Appreciate it.
The OT Coaching Confidential podcast exists to support occupational therapists and allied health professionals to think clearly, feel less alone, and take meaningful steps forward in their work. If this conversation has resonated with you, take a moment to reflect on what stood out. What were your key takeaways? What might you apply in your own personal or professional practice? If you'd like to keep the conversation going, head on over to www.theotcoach.au. You'll find free resources, workshops, trainings, and practical tools to support you wherever you are in your career. And if you're interested in joining the OT Coach Academy, we currently have the Paediatric Hub for Paediatric OTs, the Sole Trader Hub for sole traders, and the Business Hub for business owners with a team. Please note that the information shared in this podcast is general in nature and is not intended to replace individualized professional advice. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you in the next episode. The OT Coach, where therapists come to grow.